All right, for starting your final draft, and looking at my thumbnail sketch, I have a little bit of space over here that I still want to happen. And I have some cropping. So I'm going to lightly give myself some guidelines, or if you're like, oh, half of the paper is going to be the bag and the other half is going to be, you know, whatever object you have added, then you could give yourself like a halfway guideline. So you're like, okay, I have half the paper for the bag and half the paper for whatever it is. For me, I'm just going to do a light guideline here. And when I do that, I'm holding my pencil at the very end. So it's as lightly as humanly possible. Okay. Then I'm going to go through my steps. So my first step is a corner, except for me, I'm cropping off my corner. So then I'm going to go for parallel sides and angles. So if you don't have an obvious corner to start from, you might have to skip ahead to angles. So I'm going to hold my pencil up, transfer down, double check. Okay, parallel, parallel, parallel. Before I talked about the rip or the opening of mine taking up more space than the back end of the bag. So I want to make sure I'm kind of giving myself guidelines for the width of that. So if here's where it stops, then perhaps like here is where that rip is. All right, so you're not touching your bag, you're just watching. Stop touching your bag, thank you. All right, then you're gonna break it down into shapes because most of your bags do not look like what we originally started with. So you're breaking it down into shapes and finding the angles for the shapes. And so you can hold your pencil up and find basic angles for the rips and tears or pieces that are folded over. And then if you're unsure of your drawing ability, this is the part that I would get checked. Like if you struggled with thumbnail sketching, you struggle with proportion, maybe you want to get this stage checked. All right, then you're going to move on. So then I'm going to add a simple contour outline and do some adjusting. So I'm going to look at how this kind of dips in a little bit more. I'm going to start adding major wrinkles as well. Just guidelines for them so that I know as I'm drawing like, hey, there's a wrinkle here. And it can always get adjusted. All right, then I feel like this is more curved, comes up. So I'm gonna start adding in a little bit more of what I actually see. All right, then as you're working, and I'll pass this out to everybody as well, you need a scratch piece of paper underneath your hand at all times. You may wash your hands, but then like your wrist, your elbow, etc. Actually, when you guys pick up final draft, I'll leave it up here. So to avoid fingerprints, because fingerprints happen now in the drawing part when you're like touching the paper, etc. And also it helps to like, oh, I'm just focusing on this part. So a scratch piece of paper underneath your hand. So if my hand's just sitting on the paper, or some of you want to like hold it with a scratch piece of paper. Fingerprints are part of your craftsmanship grade. And once they're on there, it's hard to get rid of them. All right, so then I'm going to block in a little bit further my major areas. Oh, actually, that comes up a little bit further. So you're going to break it down into further shapes, looking at major wrinkles. Major wrinkle, major wrinkle. Okay, then I have my strawberry in here. And then I have my inside fold, which is parallel to the outside folds. Okay, so then for erasing, I'd make sure you use I would keep this eraser for tiny areas. If you're doing major erasing, like, oh, now I can erase this part, I don't need this guideline anymore. I'm gonna adjust this back edge anyway. So use your big eraser for that kind of stuff. Save your small one for tiny little areas, and it's good for wrinkles as well. All right, so once you have everything blocked in like this, then This time, when you're drawing, you're going to draw with as much detail as possible, except you don't have to still draw tiny, tiny wrinkles. So for example, let's say I'm drawing like this part. I would definitely draw this big wrinkle right here, but maybe this one I leave out. Like this little tiny wrinkle I could leave out, but I'd probably draw this line. So anywhere where you see change of value, like the fact that it's lighter here, slightly darker here, therefore I draw this line. Slightly darker here, a little bit lighter here, draw that line. So now you're looking for changes in value to determine what little wrinkles you should draw. So if it's like super subtle, not very obvious, you can draw that right before you shade it. So this time when I'm drawing my final draft, my little jaggedy edge, I'm going to include. And I'm going to include like any of the like little curves and irregularities in the paper itself. So my little jaggedy edge I'm including, and then I like to clean up as I go. So once I have that area kind of done, then I would erase out. And then I draw a little bit, and then I'll come back and add in major wrinkles that I see where the value changes. So like along here, the value changes. And I would draw even lighter than this. I just drew it a little bit darker so you guys can see. So you're gonna go through and draw exact detail and wrinkles that change value or structure of your bag. So probably more wrinkles on your final draft, obviously. All right, so if you're still working on thumbnail sketches, you need to hurry up and move on. If you haven't glued down your bag, you need to glue down your bag. And as soon as you're done, you're gonna star your favorite. Call me over, I'll take a look sometimes in your seat just so I can see your viewpoint, and then give you some tips to make your final draft a little bit easier. All right, so get out your stuff, push your paper bags to the top of your table, clear your area,